Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Get the Scoop with Smirks. I'm Elisa Louis, and today we're diving into the fascinating world of co-packers. Whether you're a seasoned industry professional or a curious listener, this episode is packed, pun intended, with insights you don't want to miss. To give you some background here, the U.S. food and beverage co-packing industry was valued at $33.5 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach $40.3 billion by 2030, according to Horizon Grandview Research. And while exact figures are really unclear, a large percentage of food startups depend on co-packers. However, despite its significant size, the co-packing industry remains surprisingly opaque, making it a crucial yet elusive part of the food supply chain. Smirks, an importer and supplier of bulk, organic, and non-GMO conventional ingredients, collaborates with a wide range of co-packers and co-manufacturers. Whether you're part of a consumer packaged goods startup or managing a mid-size or large brand, you're likely seeking insights on how to build and strengthen successful partnerships with your co-packers. Today, we're thrilled to have one of our key co-packer partners with us to share valuable perspectives. Joining me today is Jason Luedtke, the Director of Business Development for ZoRoCo Packaging. ZoRoCo Packaging is a leading co-packing and co-manufacturing company in the food industry based in Caldwell, Idaho. And I also have my trusty co-host with us, Garrett McBride, our own Smirk's VP of Operations. And today we're leaning on Garrett to bring us his unique perspective as well, as someone who's worked on both sides, working for a CPG brand and in partnership with co-packers like ZoRoCo. Welcome, Jason and Garrett.
Hi, Elise. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Elisa. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Jason and I go back far enough that I even know what he looks like without a beard. If you can
That is true.
That is
a
I
very
think that
true
the purpose
statement.
of that beard was to cover up all the facial tattoos.
Yeah. And neck tattoos.
And the neck tats. Oh, we lost our cameras.
Yep. There you did. Yeah, see, that works. That was a good trick. You were working on that trick, weren't you?
How do you like that?
Show of support.
Oh, very nice. I feel like this might have been planned even, maybe just a little bit. Well, the beard it's a joke. It's become my brand. It's a kind of a silly thing, but honestly, walking around super busy trade shows, I usually say, look for the big goofy guy with the glasses and beard, and it works pretty well, to be honest with you. So,
yeah, it's tough to miss.
Well, we're here to support. We just had to put our beards on.
I like it.
You have a little bit of fun.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's
Truth
a
be
good
told,
one.
I'm
You guys
just
got me
jealous.
good on that one.
It'd take me 30 years. I wouldn't even come close to that impressive thing.
Yeah, we're all about having fun here, and you're definitely, a fun business partner, friend of ours, Jason. And we'd love for you, though, to seriously share a little bit about your professional background. And hey, tell us a fun fact about yourself.
Well, so food industry, reinvented into the food industry in 2013 at ZoRoCo. I have done my entire food industry tenure with ZoRoCo. Before that, I was a land surveyor. That's what brought me to Idaho. I came up and was the surveyor of record on one of the larger master plan communities in the Boise area. And spent 4 years, my first 4 years in Idaho, wandering around the woods by myself every day, and it was fantastic, to be honest with you. And then, some things changed with the housing industry, and it was time to find a different direction. And here we are with ZoRoCo, and I couldn't be happier. I've found a family here and some excellent mentors and leaders, and here we are. What is that, 12 years, 13 years later, and I have a whole host of industry friends, including Garrett and all the guys at Smirks and many other brands and suppliers around the food industry. So, fun fact, I'm a farm kid from Montana, so that implies that everyone thinks I'm a cowboy or at least a ranch kid or whatever, which I am. Did all the different things, but I have never ridden a horse in my life, except for one exception, and that was when I was about 8 years old, through a crowded bar, which really surprised the heck out of my mom when she saw me walking through a crowded bar on a horse. So, other than that, no horseback riding in my 50 years of life.
Okay, all right. Quite the intro. Awesome. Well, I love hearing about your background. And I'd love to hear actually a little bit about ZoRoCo, and I think our listeners would too. I
Sure.
was kind of digging around, poking around about ZoRoCo, and I happened to notice that it says the company was founded in 2007, and I'm like, that sounds awfully familiar. Smirks was founded in 2007. Am I right on that?
You're absolutely correct. So ZoRoCo was born as ZoRoCo, ZoRoCo Packaging, the brand, in 2007. There was an existing company that the owners had purchased and began managing a couple years before that under a different name. It was the fledgling, call it seed of what our frozen division now is. And they quickly grew the company past the small space that they had originally taken over. When they left that original facility and they built our first standalone structure, they needed to leave the original name behind and rebrand as a new DBA, company name. And that's really, and that was 2007, and that's when ZoRoCo as the brand was born, is really when we built our own greenfield facility that is still operational and in the parking lot next door I'm sitting today.
All right. And could I ask, I mean, ZoRoCo is certainly a unique name, and I think our listeners are going to want to hear the backstory about how the name came about, and then the company's interesting green dragon logo. What's the backstory on that?
Yeah, it's a fun story, and it's always part of the tours. So if you've come to ZoRoCo and you've gotten a tour from me or any of my colleagues, usually there's a stop. There's a little plaque on the wall that has the logo, and it's really done its job as a brand, brand icon. It is eye catching. It's a fun story to tell, and so it's a green Kirin dragon, and the Kirin dragon is it's a mystical dragon from the Japanese culture. The co-founder of the company was a Japanese gentleman by heritage. His daughter, only daughter, and our owner were husband and wife. And they were really, it's tough to rebrand as a company, but they wanted to, honor Mark Ikabasu was his name, his Japanese heritage. And so they picked the Kirin Dragon with a little homage to the Japanese culture. And then the name itself, ZoRoCo, if you notice or the logo, it's got capitals and lowercase. And so the Zo and the Ro and the Co are really the first beginning names of the three grandchildren. So there's three grandchildren. The Zo is the Zoe, and if you know the dragon very well, it has a tiara on top because she's the princess of the family.
Love it.
If you know the logo well, the dragon is also holding a samurai sword. Well, the Ro is Ronin. He is the middle son, happens to also be in the middle of the ZoRoCo name. And a Ronin is a masterless samurai, so that's why the samurai sword is being held by the dragon. And then the oldest brother, Cole, whose middle name also happens to be Kirin, which is the mystical Kirin dragon horse, is the last of the Zo, Ro, and Co. So really what you have is the children and therefore grandchildren of the founders, Zoe, Ronan, and Cole. And that's where ZoRoCo comes from.
That's really cool. I love the fact that that there's so much meaning baked into that name and logo, and it's like such a powerful symbol as well.
Yeah, it's really been a fun brand to represent, and I couldn't be prouder for sure.
So, Jason, from your perspective, I mean, if we get into kind of talking about what is the role of a co-packer, how do you define that?
That's It's such a wide question, and I want to answer it succinctly. So, first and foremost, I mentioned earlier, I've only really worked at one co-packer, one co-man, and that's ZoRoCo. And so I'm speaking from how we do it. I can't promise that's how everyone in the industry does it, but we are pretty proud of how we've built our system of co-packing. And so I'm really speaking from that side of things. Um, and and so in our opinion, co-packers, co-mans, and there's a little differentiation between those two terms, but we know where we are in the industry. You know, ZoRoCo itself doesn't own or sell any of its own brands, and so we're not out competing for any market share with the brands we represent. We're really here to create the opportunities for our brand partners. You know, we're here to add value to their business. You know, we provide the superstructure, the equipment, the expertise, but at the end of the day, we're a service provider. We're a problem solver, and we're a path to their scalability. You know, we don't grow unless our brands grow. And so we're really here to serve and support the brands that are out there fighting in the food industry to build their names and build their own sales. I mean, that's as simple as it gets, really, as what a co-backer should be focused on.
So just a follow up to that, could you kind of define the difference a little bit for our listeners between a co-packer and a co-manufacturer, just so
Yeah,
that's a little bit
sure.
more clear?
This is again my terminology. I'm
Yeah.
sure people will debate it. You know, maybe we'll get a hot viral debate going online about the two differences. But in my mind, co-packing is really more of a bag conversion. It's probably taking maybe there's a limited amount of mixing and then filling, but it's really moving something from a large package into a smaller package. Co-manufacturing is when you're adding true value. Let's say baking a cookie. Let's say, you know, emulsifying a plant-based butter. It's doing a manufacturing process versus just putting something from a bigger bag into a smaller bag ready for the retail shelf. So, in a very simplified version, that's how I kind of think of it as the differentiation. Co-pack is just it's more of a change of size. Co-manufacturer, you're doing a manufacturing process. You're value adding something from base ingredients to a finished product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'd imagine that it's crucial to understand those differences, and of course, every business is going to want to think about what their own needs are, and whether they need that extra level of that co-manufacturing capability, or if they're just looking for somebody who can pack a product from a bulk package into an 8-ounce bag, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right on point. That's kind of how I define it in my mind. And you know, it's a blurry line. There's no right or wrong answer, honestly, but I think you're definitely right on point.
Great. Well, switching over to you, Garrett, what do you think of in terms of, you've worked with brands, you've been a co-packer before, you have these different perspectives. What's your take on this role?
Yeah, I have a unique perspective in that I've done kind of every piece of the puzzle along the way, and I agree with everything that Jason said. Additionally, you know, from a brand perspective, working with a great contract manufacturer allows you to focus on the other non-manufacturing aspects of scaling your business. It allows you to free up capital that can be allocated to, you know, to growth elsewhere, like sales, which is, you know, ultimately what we're all after.
Yeah.
In many cases, you know, co-mans also offer value beyond the manufacturing and beyond the packaging. There might be food science, there might be R&D help, you know, for development and commercialization support for new programs and products. Outsourcing manufacturing operations can be a really effective strategy, you know, for brands to allow them to scale quickly while remaining flexible and agile, which is extremely important for, you know, brands from the smallest to the largest scale.
Awesome.
And one little thought that I just had, and I didn't think of it until Garrett mentioned that, but the auditing side is super crucial as well. I mean, you know, we carry BRC A plus, you know, and if you're a brand growing into large scale retail, to get into all the major retailers, you have to have a fully compliant, fully high-level auditing package, and that's something that a brand, even a mid-sized brand, trying to do on their own is, you just don't realize what a huge bite of the apple that really is. So the auditing and the food safety package is probably equally as important as the equipment and actual, operational acumen that comes with running the plant, is really having the certification and the paperwork side to back it all up. So that's a pretty important piece of it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And along with that comes the quality department that any competent contract manufacturer should have. As a brand or as another party associated, we're relying on the contract manufacturer's quality team and processes, to ensure our collective success. So super important piece of it, along with certifications, the audits. Food safety and quality can't be understated in terms of importance in this world.
Great stuff. Yeah. So with that, Jason, I'm just kind of curious, as far as your thoughts on this. What do you think this kind of the secret is to a successful and productive CPG brand and co-packer relationship, since this is so crucial?
Yeah, the secret sauce, I think it's probably going to sound a little bit too warm and fuzzy when we're talking about, technical operations and things like that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to trust, in my opinion. It's pure and simple. When you trust one another, and it's a two-way street, to be very clear. I mean, the packer has to trust the relationship of the brand, and the brand has to trust that the co-man is going to do the right thing, that they're on top of things. And so it's really a trust relationship. But, trust isn't given, trust is earned. And so I think maybe the magic, honestly, is how do you get to that trust? It's not something that either side necessarily has right away. The co-pack industry has had a black eye in the past, and has got some, there's some horror stories out there. And so, I think brands inherently come in with maybe a little bit of defensiveness sometimes. And so you have to earn that trust and get to that partnership foundation. And I think what we've learned in our philosophy of doing this over the years is you do that through complete transparency. There's nothing that we do in our organization that isn't able to be seen by the brands in a live 24/7 scenario. We do it with high integrity. We're usually calling you before you know that there's a problem. That's how you solve problems. And, along with that integrity, and that's a doing the right thing kind of core values type of statement, but it really is what leads to good communication and high performance as well. And so, we talk constantly with our brands. They have access to their own information. And then you have to perform. I mean, that's the other thing, is at the end of the day, you have to execute against your POs. You have to hit fulfillment. We make fulfillment guarantees. And if you do that and you do those things right, what you end up with is trust. And then when the problems that ultimately arise come up, you tackle them together. And that's, to me, that's the ultimate, most important part of a co-pack brand relationship. Is really just boils down to that trust factor.
Great stuff. Garrett, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this one too. What do you think?
Yeah, trust is absolutely right. I mean, Jason's spot on with that. Without that, it's very challenging to have a true meaningful partnership. Really effective communication and transparency are key components of that brand and co-man relationship. The contract manufacturer you choose should be aligned with your organization's strategies and should take on a supporting role in your growth and not be a constraint and not be a roadblock. They shouldn't be standing in the way of your growth and your progress. They should be an active partner. And that's super important. I think the most productive partnerships are the ones that allow all the parties to grow and get better together. It's not just a one-sided thing. It never will be. It never should be. It's a collaborative effort. And, one person succeeds, we all succeed. Doing business with your co-man shouldn't feel like you're dragging an anchor behind the boat. We've all been there at some point if you've been in this business long enough, and it's not fun. Having that good, true partner that you can trust and that you can have faith in to run a very important part of your business, manufacturing, is so important. can't tell you how many times I was in the facility in Idaho with Jason. You know, how we'd roll up our sleeves, put on our hairnets, put on our gloves. We'd do the R&D, we'd do the line trials together. You know, being able to be hands-on and completely cohesive and transparent is immensely helpful in you know, building the relationships and maintaining that ongoing rapport.
Yeah, we love it when our brands come in and take part in their own activities. You know, the brands know what they want out on the shelves in the customer's hands, and we can listen and we can read and we can learn and we can even sample, you know, control samples. But when a brand is right there with you out on the floor, seeing it happen real time, they're able to look you in the eye and say, this is what I expected to see, and then you just start to build. Otherwise, you're on the phone back and forth and you're guessing, hey, is this the exact right color? Is this the exact right texture? It seems so, but then it becomes my judgment, not the brand's judgment. So we love it when they come to the plant. We have an open door policy. Almost all of the early piloting there is accompanied by the brand representative, and that's it's the first one of those early steps in that relationship and trust component for sure.
That's great. And from a brand's perspective, let's just say I'm working for a brand, Jason, and I'm trying to navigate choosing a co-packer. What should I be looking for?
That's a big question.
I know it is. I know it, but just, you know, tackle it the best you can. Yeah.
Yeah, we have 3 hours. Okay, well,
exactly.
So we're going to use most of that up for sure. But no, I mean, you know, there has to be an operational fit, right? There has to be the right product, the right equipment. You have to do the operational due diligence to make sure that the pairing is appropriate from, call it the technical side or the tactical side. The bag has to fit my machine. The product has to go through my filler. And frankly, it has to go through at a speed that makes it a healthy piece of business for both sides. So there's this tactical element that can't be ignored, right? We have to do the right due diligence to make sure that the project succeeds. And that's honestly, at the onset of a new business development scenario, that's really what I focus a lot of time on. And it does take time. It often takes months to do some of those things. And that's not in all out of line with you know, what it takes to do a proper, you know, due diligence of a new project. But then at the end of the day, and it's usually through those communications, that you've got to feel good about the fact that you have a genuine partnership. We have to like one another, and we don't have to be best friends. We don't have to, you know, have sleepovers, but that it's that trust building factor, right? I mean, after a few, you know, month or 2 months of exchanging communications and phone calls and validating all those operational pieces, you kind of get to know who you're dealing with. And this is a hard industry. There's a lot of stresses. There's a lot of things that go wrong. It's hard enough. We want to work with folks that we believe in, that we can get behind, and that we feel the same type of partnership back with them. And so it's warm and fuzzy, it's intangible, it's hard to put a finger on, Elisa, but you've got to find that genuine partnership in some of that early communication to know that it's going to be a good fit. And, you know, maybe there's not a exact litmus test beyond your gut, but it's an important part of it, because our intent with any new brand relationship is to work with them for years. We don't do transactional work. We do partnership manufacturing. And so, you know, it solves those future problems so much easier when you've built that foundation of trust, a professional friendship, and you actually want to see your brand succeed. You get behind them, and that makes you motivated to help them, you know, and that's, you know, all part of that trust building that I would say is still the vital part of it.
So as a follow-up to that, if as a new brand, let's say I'm kind of, you know, I'm struggling a little bit to find the right partner that can start me out at the right minimum order quantity that I can bear, but works for the co-packer. I imagine that question and that sort of challenge comes up quite a bit. I mean, what's your take on that question in terms of, well, can you do a lower minimum order quantity
Yeah, I
for
mean,
me?
there's always a few core questions on every first introduction call. I mean, there's some of the just the kind of the big questions that can't be avoided, and the minimums question is absolutely one of the most important for both sides.
Hmm.
It's a tricky question. It's one that takes a little tact to navigate, um, and the tricky part that I often try to talk to, I mean, you kind of know who you're talking to based around some of where they're at in the market, where they're at in their distribution. And so you have kind of a sense of where their volumes may or may not lie, fairly early on, maybe even before the first conversation. But, our job as high volume co-packers, co-mans, is to allow you to say yes to your sales. It's allowing you to scale up and go big, and that's what the brands want to do, right? They want to find their traction, generate their sales, but I always think of it and try to use the analogy of stepping stones. You have to make sure you're not taking too big a step too soon. And this is a hard conversation that I've had many, many, many times. Is maybe we're not the best first step, out of a commercial kitchen or whatever. Maybe we're the third step, and sometimes I have to say that to brands. And it isn't that I don't support emerging brands. We love our emerging brands. I'm very proud of the emerging brands that have now become big brands. But there is just as much danger and risk to a young emerging brand to have too much inventory than not enough inventory. Um, Too much inventory that isn't pushing through the sales cycle fast enough is dead money for the brand. And it's just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than not filling the orders that they have. And so there is a lot of delicacy in making good decisions on timing. When are you ready as a small brand versus a larger brand that already has nationwide distribution? It's a slightly different conversation. For the emerging brands, you just need to know that we're a big beast, and when you turn us on, you're going to get a lot of product, and you're going to get it fast, and you're going to get it every month, and you're going to get exactly what you order from us. And you need to know that you're going to be able to keep it moving through your side, or I lose that value. I become a hindrance to your growth versus a benefit to your growth. And those are tricky conversations to navigate. And sometimes I say no because I just know from experience that it's not the right time, and I don't want to be that hindrance. I want to wait a year and let them get their traction, and then have them come back, and both sides be in a much more healthy position.
That
Does
comes
that
back
make
to
sense?
transparency and communication also, though. When we're having these conversations as a customer interviewing a co-man, or a co-man communicating about your capabilities, that minimum order quantity is so critical, because it is based on a certain a cost target.
Right.
The brands have to understand that if they want a reduced minimum order quantity, there is a cost associated with that. And then the conversation
Sure.
around building up, to a tiered volume that will allow for lower cost over time, it really
Yep.
has to be outlined and understood by everybody, because
Yeah.
oftentimes there is a path, but it's not as cost effective as brands would like out of the gate. But you have to look
Sure.
forward and look at the big picture of
Yeah.
your business, and have faith in your scale plan.
Yeah, I mean, I love you saying that, Garrett. I mean, that is, part of the, like I mentioned earlier, we all have to, this is a pennies game in the food industry. We all have to be healthy to grow. And you're exactly right. I mean, I call it runway. Sometimes small brands need a runway to get up there, and I come up with pretty creative solutions to get there, but, you can't necessarily have, super high volume costing, but only run super low volume, POs. And so it's a balancing act for sure. It's a balancing act for the brands. It's a balancing act for the packer, and quite frankly, from the Smirks and supplier side. I mean, you guys are dealing with minimums and orders, and a lot of times the other side of my conversation to the brands about minimums is, well, it's one thing about how us, ZoRoCo, as a packer structures our minimums, but do you have any insight? Have you talked to your supplier about what can you buy? I mean, you might have to buy a certain amount of packaging of a particular raw ingredient that's not in alignment with what our numbers are. And so this is where a little bit of that supplier and packer relationship comes in, and my insight knowing how you guys operate as suppliers really helps me guide brands on, hey, that's just not going to work. You can't just buy, 150-pound bag of something. You have to think in terms of pallet minimums. You have to be prepared for some of those types of things, because that's all going to funnel back to what my minimums are. And a lot of times I'll work to try to pair my minimums so we can consume all the wrong, as close to possible on a run of raw ingredients. And that's just again a little bit of the balancing act of the brand side minimum, but also the co-packer supplier relationship. And why we lean on our relationship with Smirks is to know how you guys operate, because that really has a direct effect of my life too. I don't know if I've kind of gone astray on the question there, but it does all three sides of the legs of the table have to work together for sure on that minimums question.
No, I love that piece of it. I think that's really helpful insights. And Garrett, you touched on just how important having that in-depth conversation about the minimum order quantity is when you're going to select a co-packer. In your role in the past with going out and looking for co-packers, what were some of the other items on your checklist as far as must-haves?
Yeah, that checklist was long and kind of a moving target of priority. But certainly, as Jason mentioned, the core competency, you have to have the right manufacturer that can do the right things so that everybody can be set up to succeed. Cost, of course, is one of the most important components. Location, quality is huge. Have to have faith and a lot of confidence in the quality systems in place with the contract manufacturers. Minimum order quantities, lead times, scope of function. A lot of times it's who's purchasing ingredients, who's purchasing packaging. Is this a turnkey endeavor, or is this just strictly tolling with the brand bringing all the materials in, for the manufacturing effort? And let's not forget character. It makes life so much easier when you have reliable, trustworthy partners, that are functionally taking responsibility for the most important part of your business. So there's never just one list. It's a big big.
I can imagine too, like if I'm a brand that is marketing the fact that I'm free from certain allergens, that's a whole nother issue too.
Exactly.
Right?
The specifics around what you're trying to achieve, from a product, value proposition standpoint, has to be taken into account, because there are manufacturers that won't deal with certain allergens or will only deal with certain allergens or have various constraints. And, that's, again, communication and transparency. We need to understand what the brand is looking for, what the contract manufacturer can deliver against, and make sure that everybody's aligned in moving forward or not, hit those targets.
Jason, to that point, how does ZoRoCo navigate the whole allergen question and scenario?
So we're a fairly unique animal in the sense that we have three different, brick and mortar facilities. So three independent, standalone production plants, and each one has different allergen parameters around them. So we're pretty darn unique in the sense that we do offer Big Nine allergen free. So that's a dedicated facility that allows none of the Big Nine allergens. And it has unique, that's our baking facility. So we bake cookies and granola, grams, and a variety of other products. We do tons of other things in that thing, but there is zero, never been any of the Big Nine allergens. second plant in the thing is in our little quiver of plants is gluten free. That's a dedicated GFCO, gluten free and peanut free, but I do allow what I'll call allergen friendly. So I do allow the other, the soys, dairies, tree nuts, coconut, none of the shellfishes or the protein based ones, but and the other non-gluten, non-peanut allergens are welcome at that facility. So that's where I do a ton of oatmeals, a lot of baking mixes, those types of things there. And then we have a temperature controlled facility that its restriction is only peanuts. So I can allow gluten at that facility, but there is no peanuts allowed in any of the three of our facilities. And so, one of those early vetting conversations, Garrett just touched on all the different important checklists of things is, beyond the size of unit and the shape of the unit, the texture of the product and what filler is going to be done with it. And does it fit the cartoner? It's also, what is your allergen parameters? And that's maybe the first question I often ask, because before I even go down the line, if I have peanuts in it, I'm sorry, but it's just not going to work. And so those are just part of that really introductory level vetting process of deciding which direction to take a project. Can the project go even at all? But allergens and the paperwork around allergens, those, if a brand is making an allergenic claim, whether it's just gluten-free or if it's Big Nine free, there has to be all the documentation to back it up. You can't just say it, you have to live it. And so that's a whole different level of quality beyond the, call it standard workmanship type quality that comes into play when you're running an allergen specific plant.
Yeah, in this day and age, that allergen control is just so important. It's such a hot button topic. There are a lot of people that impacts. Having a contract manufacturer that can effectively manage that is a gigantic plus in the positive column.
Yeah.
Such a range and variety of different capabilities within your three plants, Jason. So it certainly gives customers a lot of options, and it helps to just
don't tell anyone, but we're not very good at saying no to things. This is, I think, what that means, to be honest with you.
I can twist your arm. Yeah.
There's always a conversation.
Unless it's got peanuts, forget about it.
Yeah,
right?
there's peanuts. Now, I mean, that's one of the benefits, and we're a little off topic here, but we're a privately held company. Our owner is very entrepreneurial. If we feel good about the people and the partnership and the product and we see growth, we're very not afraid to say yes to things we've never done before. We believe we have the operational skill set to, manufacturing is manufacturing to a degree. And if you're good at doing one thing, you can take those same principles and apply it to other product types, maybe other pieces of equipment, and still utilize the same principles. And so, we're pretty diverse on purpose because we don't want all of our eggs in one basket, for one, from a personal side of our business strategy. But secondarily, if it makes sense, if it's economically viable, if it pencils out for both parties, we're willing to look at things that we've never done before, and we're willing to push the limits and challenge ourselves to try new products. And, we do lots of, quite a few different wild, crazy things for sure. So it keeps it fun, keeps it stressful, but it also allows us to keep a pretty wide view of what can and can't be done for the food industry. It allows us to stay on trend a little bit, as the trends in food change. We can pivot with them, and we aren't just locked into one mindset that we only do this and we only do that and we won't do anything else. And I think that's really served us well, why we have a wide range of really high profile brands across the industry. So we're pretty proud of that, to be honest with you.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want to ask you about trends in a little bit, but I just, I want to bring up the fact that, it sounds like the business is really nimble, and I think that's great because, like you said, the natural and organic food industry is just growing so rapidly, and it does go in different directions all the time. Every year we go to Expo West, we see something new, right? And,
yeah. If Expo West is your bellwether of what the industry's like, and you've been to Expo West, you know exactly what the industry is like.
Yes. 100%. But let's just shift gears a little bit. I mean,
Sure.
if I'm coming to you guys and saying, look, I'm a brand, I've been struggling with my current co-packer, it's just not working. What's your advice for me? Garrett, let's start with you.
I think for brands that are struggling with their contract manufacturer relationship, we keep touching on these recurring themes here, but the communication, critical, the transparency. If there are miscommunications, if there are delays, addressing the issues early and directly is a key piece. It's also important to understand your co-man's constraints or what their pain points are, and to be able to work with them and be open to having that dialogue to collaboratively identify and execute the solutions that ultimately will allow you to fix the problems or move through the challenges. Managing the collective expectations in the form of a contract or a written agreement up front helps everybody involved, so that all parties can clearly understand how the relationship is intended to function, and what the consequences will be if the balls get dropped by either side. The agreements are something that get overlooked by a lot of people, but in the event that you have challenges, you can always go back to the agreement as the guiding document that says we agreed to X, Y, and Z. If X, Y, and Z aren't met, we understand that there's a consequence here, whether financial or timing or what have you, but it's outlined and agreed to up front, and no surprises later on down the road if challenges arise. The other critical thing, and nobody ever wants to hear this, but you got to know when to throw in the towel. If you as a brand owner continue to beat your head against the wall and keep getting nowhere, you got to cut your losses and move on sometimes. There are so many great partner-minded contract manufacturers out there. It's worth taking the time to understand what that competitive landscape looks like, and to take that time to make sure that your co-man is truly a good fit and a proper partner.
To follow up on just some of those thoughts too, something that popped into my head as you were speaking is also geographic location, right? We can have, whether it's a lovely partnership with a co-packer, but maybe they're way across the country from where we need our products to be or to be distributed through. So, what do you suggest on that front? If I've got a great co-packer partner, but they're only covering part of my market, or they're not covering my needs very well geographically because my freight costs just keep going up.
Yeah, it's important to line up your distribution network with your contract manufacturing network in a way that makes sense. I guess we're fortunate, the world we live in right now is such a small place. Transit times are shorter than they've ever been. Costs are up and down, but it is certainly important to make sure that you've taken into account the physical locations of your distribution network relative to those of your manufacturers, and make sure that it makes financial and logistical sense.
Yeah,
Jason, I know you've had the scenario a million times. Yeah, give us your thoughts.
A million times. In those early vetting questions, I've for sure learned that that's one of my vetting questions. And sometimes I know when to throw in the towel before we even get going. If you're heavily distributed in New England, I'm probably not your best choice. And let's not go down a path that we're going to create a disaster 6 months from now or a year from now or whatever. And so, I've gotten pretty savvy in learning, hey, where does your product come in from and where does it going to go back out to? Because even if you don't know to ask that question, I know to ask that question, and so that's an important factor. The products have to move around the country. The way our American food industry is set up is there's transportation involved pretty much at every step of the way, and so that's a factor that just can't be ignored. No doubt about that. Good, bad, or otherwise, it's just an important consideration. And frankly, it's better to talk about it, like Garrett mentioned earlier. All these things are better to talk about up front and be open and completely transparent about. Some of my best projects have been lost in the final hour because nobody did a freight study until we were about ready to sign on a dotted line and the whole thing blew up. And that was months of work down the drain. And I'd rather talk about freight up front and not have that rug pulled out from under me down the line. Now, can I always solve it? Definitely can't move my plants around every single day of the year just to, to fit a distribution model, but it's an important factor that needs to be discussed, no doubt.
And we might as well throw in a shameless plug for Smirks here. On the supply side, when we're talking about geographic location, we have warehouses on both the East Coast, the West Coast, and in Colorado. So when it comes to supplying ingredients to a co-man really in any location around the country, we have an option somewhere nearby, reasonably speaking.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the reason we call Smirks is our usual first supplier option on any product is because we know where your warehouses are and we know that we can access them, and that's something that we think about from our side of things all the time. I mean, and so that's part of the bond that we have with Smirks from a co-pack standpoint is that element of proximity and access to both coasts and all those kind of things. So that's for sure important from a co-packer to supplier side as well.
Helps that.
So Jason, besides, I'm sorry.
It just keeps things flexible and agile. Keeps business moving forward.
Absolutely. So besides the whole geographic issue or challenge, what are the other reasons that people come to you? Having already worked with one co-packer and they're struggling and looking to you to potentially be their new co-packer.
Yeah, Garrett, he's super savvy. He always has been. That's why we've become friends over the years. But he hit the nail on the head. I mean, he used the term pain points, and honestly, that's a term that we use internally in almost every discussion we have. It is stressful. It is, time consuming, even costly to move co-packers. Nobody does it just for fun. I mean, that's the bottom line. So if you're a brand that's out there, you do have sales, you do have traction, and you're needing to grow and scale, you're not going to leave something that's working. It wouldn't make any sense. So there has to be a particular pain. It's a pain of fulfillment. Your orders are either being pushed out or incomplete. You're having quality issues. Those are the things that really are the main drivers of making the very difficult decision to move manufacturing. It's not taken lightly, and those are the very first questions I also ask at that vetting stage. What do you need to solve here? And if we don't all know what the problem is, then I don't know how to solve it. I don't know how to think about what is important to you as the brand. And so we've got to just, kind of pull the Band-Aid and ask the hard questions and really figure out what those pain points are, make sure that ZoRoCo's appropriately set up to solve them. And maybe I am, and usually I am, frankly, but maybe I'm not. And I'd rather know that right out of the gate. And that just kind of comes back to the common theme that we've touched on multiple times is trust, transparency, integrity, and just I don't want to set myself up to fail. Being super selfish, why would I want to go? Because it's a lot of work for us as well. I don't want to set either side up for disappointment if I can't solve the pain point that we know is already occurring. And it would just be silly for both sides if I did that. So,
got to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a win-win. This whole industry has to live off win-wins.
The nature of partnership.
Makes a lot of sense, for sure. We've talked about it, sprinkling it throughout this conversation, but from your perspective, Jason, as far as the partnership that ZoRoCo and Smirk shares, what do you think really makes that collaboration successful between the supplier of the ingredients and the co-packer?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of the same thing, just applied in a different direction. I mean, the reason we work and really pick up the phone and we call Smirk first is the same reason. You're a customer to us and we're a customer to you. We're doing business together back and forth all the time. And so, the brand is our ultimate customer, but, we have to have that trust factor together. I need to know that my supplier is going to deliver at the time that they say they're going to deliver, that their inventory is tight, that they're not going to send me old product, that they're going to have all their paperwork in order. And that's an important part of what I need so I can serve the brand on the other end. We can both serve the brand. You want them to believe in you. We want them to believe in us. And so if the supplier and the co-man isn't working well together, if we don't trust each other's quality, we both risk looking bad, and so it's got to be that same kind of partnership orientation. Now, the benefit that we have as supplier co-packer is, between your subject matter expertise, my subject matter expertise, Garrett and I can get on the phone. We can talk about a project. He can talk about it from the ingredient side. He already knows, because of our history, because of that trust, he knows what equipment I have. He knows how that it works. He knows, what granulation of sugar is better for a particular type of application than a different type. I know from my side, your organic certificates are going to be perfectly dialed in, that we're not going to have a paperwork issue, that if you say you've got product in a warehouse, you've got product in a warehouse and it's going to get to me on time. And so, through that trust and that mutual effort together, we both can shine in the eyes of the brands. We both can grow our businesses, and it just the trust factor with our suppliers is equal to the trust back and forth with brands.
Anything to add to that, Garrett, from our perspective as the ingredient supplier?
The dynamic between Smirks and ZoRoCo is very similar to that of the brand co-man partnership dynamic. Again, it comes back to trust, communication, transparency. It's just as important on the supply side as it is on the manufacturing and sales side. With everybody, the supplier, the contract manufacturer, the brand working together seamlessly, the results speak for themselves and everybody succeeds. And that's the goal in this. I mean, everybody, right. The collective success, rising tide floats all boats sort of thing. It's also extremely helpful that, Smirks in particular has direct relationships with a lot of the brands that work with ZoRoCo and work with a lot of the contract manufacturers that we supply. And we're able to execute more effectively because we understand the needs of those brands outside of just the manufacturing relationship. So to have the more complete picture, the bigger picture of their business in mind as we're having conversations with Jason and ZoRoCo, as they're having conversations with their brands, we're all aligned. We're all ready to go into battle together and just generally kick ass.
Yeah. And I trust the whole team at Smirks, and I know all of you guys, but Garrett and I have been working together for a super long time. I'll ask him how to help me solve a problem. If I'm struggling with something, something's just not processing right, I know I can pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what's happening. What do you think about this? Like, why is this not working out? And these kind of conversations happen a lot of times without the brand ever knowing it. And maybe what we can do is recommend a different granulation or a different, a different source supply or something that does make it, and I'm just making up examples, but a product flow a little bit easier or be a little less sticky, and so, relying on the subject matter expertise of our supplier is important too. I know that Garrett's traveled the world and goes and personally vets a lot of the growing, sides of the business and things like that. And so, I know it's solid start to finish. Our quality department knows it's solid start to finish because I know the guy that went to, Southeast Asia and actually looked at where the coconuts were grown and, things like that, and so that there's a lot of, it prevents a lot of sleepless nights when you know who your partner is on the supply side too,
Yeah, and one of the interesting things
exactly.
Absolutely, you got to know
across the board.
One thing I've noticed is that the more customers that we share, Jason, in terms of Smirks and ZoRoCo, the more efficiencies we have too, because we end up building full trucks going to your facilities, which saves our customers time and money. So we can just pass on that savings to them, and you get the ingredients that much quicker.
Sure.
So that's, from my perspective, that's been one of the nice bonuses of having kind of these multiple shared clients.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's good to keep it in family. I mean, honestly, that's there's efficiency all the way around. I mean, if you're detecting themes through what Garrett and I are saying, I think you could find a few common threads that, are pretty paramount in every different direction within our industry, and I think that's you start to see that efficiency, and it becomes real dollars and cents if you look at the bigger picture of how you can shave time and energy and cost on different things by having that kind of collective mindset, for sure.
So speaking of these partnerships, Garrett, I know you and Jason go back a long ways, well before the beard, and collaborating together. And so, from your thoughts, could you share insights into your working relationship you've had with Jason and ZoRoCo and what it was like?
Yeah, you're right. We go way back, and when it all started, when it was all, the dating period, trying to feel each other out and see if this was a path we wanted to go down, as a brand manufacturer partnership. I was very skeptical. We had some very specific and complicated requirements as a brand, with regard to the products and the value propositions. And Jason was so honest and straightforward about their business and about the way that they conducted themselves that I really almost didn't believe it. I made him work pretty hard. I mean, I can't count how many times I was out there prior to actually getting into the partnership. But you had to jump through some hoops, and at the end of the day, it was all about Jason and ZoRoCo saying what they were going to do and then doing what they said, and that's exactly what they did. And it was, and still is, with the previous brand that I used to represent, a very fruitful partnership, and it's been a great relationship since day one.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Garrett's a pro. Garrett, he was a ball buster. There's no doubt about it. I mean, but, the thing about working with strong professionals is they make us better too. I know, speaking, on behalf of our brand, but the owner personally, he expects us to be high integrity people. That's the culture he's built. That's what we all try to live. And the words that Garrett just said, I think would make him very, very happy and very proud to know that we actually, live the culture we preach, and that's what we're going to continue to do. But when you're challenged by a strong professional like Garrett, the first day he showed up, and a pro when he brings his own flashlights, ultraviolet flashlights, and he knows where to look and the things to look for, and you're like, all right, we're going to be in for this one, but at the end of the day, we live in that ready state, and we made it work. And those hoops that he makes us and other customers as well, we work with some big mega national companies on our frozen division, and they've challenged us, they've made us stronger, and we are who we are today because we have strong partnerships, and we have been challenged, and we've just learned and continue to build the blocks of high quality, and it's because we get pushed, and there's nothing wrong with that. We welcome that a little bit. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's what makes this life and business fun, is the relationships, and not just the business, the personal pieces. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's not worth waking up every day and moving forward with it. But having the relationships with especially a smaller family-run manufacturer like ZoRoCo it's rewarding and fun, and I'm thrilled to death that I get to continue participating in that partnership from the supply side. So this has kind of been a cool full circle thing for me personally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Garrett and I kind of started together in the early days, and we're still working together. And that's, like I said earlier, I rely on him all the time. Sometimes it's a ZoRoCo Smirk thing. Sometimes it's just I don't quite understand something I read. Hey, what do you know about this? What do you know about this new, statement about whatever, an allergen? What have you heard? And so, we're sharing, insight back and forth, and I really, really appreciate and rely on that from a friendship standpoint, but the professional side as well. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, man. It's been great.
So, Garrett, you don't get off the hook without actually give me a real example, a real life example of something you and Jason collaborated on, some kind of project. So do tell. I will let you reminisce a
You
little bit.
you pick, buddy. I don't care.
Oh man, we've had so many different projects and so many wild experiences. The one that sticks out in my head the most, and this is, I wish I could get into the details and the specifics. Can't do that, but at a high level, I'll never forget this, and I'm sure Jason won't either, and that team there, because it was a stressful and wild commercialization. But we had a cup project a number of years back that we just knocked out of the park on about a 5-month zero fail timeline, meaning that we had distributor deadlines that we had to meet. We had retailer deadlines. This was a zero fail mission, and we had no time in which to do this. ZoRoCo was the keystone in a project that involved work performed by 3 unrelated co-mans. One of them had to be set up from start to finish in the middle of this timeline. ZoRoCo was responsible for, helping us source, approve, procure dozens of new ingredients, packaging components. We had to work through the formulation, the line trials, the actual production, and the distribution. Again, in about a 5-month time period, and we executed flawlessly in just a couple of months. This would have taken even the most heavily resourced company 2 years. I mean, if you've been in this world, development timelines are long, 2 years or more to complete, and we just nailed it on the shortest of timelines, with really everything stacked against us. You can locking arms, moving forward. And the reality of this situation is that most other co-mans probably would have told me to pound salt because of the timeline and the complexity and just the overall probability of failure being so high. ZoRoCo had enough faith in us to greenlight the effort, and we won. And it's always great to get through a stressful, crazy, low probability of success event and win. You learn a lot about people's character when the stakes are high and when the pressure's on. And I was beyond impressed with Jason and the ZoRoCo team and what they brought to the table. And they made me look good. Our brand looked good. We were able to deliver as expected with our distributors and our retailers. And again, that agility and that flexibility was key to this whole effort, and we nailed it. But that was one of a dozen different wild projects that we brought to the table with no time and very little resource that just came together and executed perfectly.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident I know exactly what you're talking about. And, we do have to protect, details, but it involved color. It involved a lot of test blending to get to the right colorations. And Garrett and I he and I blended for multiple hours straight, testing different ratios of colorations. And we both came out of that blend and ended up probably with cocktails later, and the face is the color of his shirt right now. And so I think we were both fairly smurfed out for at least a couple of days after the fact, if memory serves me. So
Absolutely right. Yeah, that was an experience.
That's awesome.
But, it spoke to the character and the competency of your team, and the ability for all of us to pull together, align expectations, have faith in one another, and just execute. That's what makes it all worth it. Because at the end of it, you're going, unbelievable. It's amazing. It's a great feeling.
Great story. It's like the two of you were in a war together.
What it feels like sometimes. I mean, anybody who's been in development in CPG knows that. There's never enough time. There's never enough resources. But when you win, boy, does it feel good.
Yeah, there's definitely a little celebratory clinking of the glasses after a tough day of that, and you know you got across the finish line, and you know that's that you know band of brothers sisters mentality that is why we're still in contact. We're still friends today, is because we did kind of go to battle in that metaphorical sense a few times, and it certainly is applicable to Garrett. It's applicable to quite a few other people in the industry for me personally, and that is why those long relationships are forged, and is because you've had the good times, you've had a few bad times, you've overcome them, and then you have that level of I guess you'd call it friendship, professional friendship, but you can also go relax together and have fun and have a laugh and have that level of comfort after a tough day to do stuff as human beings, and to just relax and be friends and kind of laugh off all the things you just got done fighting through, and you're just stronger because of it. I mean that it's just that time behind the wheel with interpersonal relationships that just get stronger and stronger the more you do together. So
That's great. I mean, that's definitely one of those great success stories. I know we've all had our share of challenging situations too. I mean, you touched on it, Jason. I mean, the tough times, and with all the supply chain issues that are out there in the world, we have our fair share. And I think that we share that desire to communicate to our customer and our co-packing partner, or who immediately when something's not going well, like when there's a delay in a container getting to the port, you've got to be the first one to know, as well as the brand.
yeah.
They have to know so that you can adjust your schedules, because I know those schedules are critical to everybody meeting their goals down the line and ultimately getting that product on that grocery store shelf. So we've been through those times too, right, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean it's again full circle over and over and over again. But if there's that integrity there, if you're not trying to hide the fact that there's a problem, if you're picking up the phone right away and communicating, usually you can solve a problem. If I know there's a delay, I can start talking to my scheduler, and we can start moving things around, and we can start swapping, maybe we run a different SKU. But if you don't know how to solve the problem, if you don't know the problem exists, and that goes every direction, in the three-way conversation between supplier, brand, and co-man is if you're talking, you're solving. If you're not talking, you don't know what is going to fail, and then it's already too late. And so, it's really just that repetitive component of trust and communication.
That's so important.
Awesome. Well, switching gears a little bit, you touched on it earlier, Jason,
Yeah.
and I would really love to dive into a little bit more the trends that you're seeing, because ZoRoCo being kind of, very much an integral role in the whole supply chain. I know you're monitoring the trends, and I know you've done some research. So I'm really interested to hear what you think are some of the hot trends right now in the natural food industry.
Yeah, I mean, lately I would say the big one is protein, protein, protein. Everyone is seeking creative new proteins, non-typical proteins, to offer an enhancement of that protein level without either sacrificing taste or even maybe enhancing taste. So from a general theme, I would definitely say protein is really a hot button topic. I think we'll see a lot of it at Expo coming up. And I think the other things is a trend, not as much product driven, is there's without a doubt a continuation of traceability within the supply chain. The brands, but all the way down to the consumer, they like knowing where their products are coming from. They like to know that it's clean. They like to know that the folks behind the brand, meaning the suppliers, meaning the co-mans, we know, they know where the farm source is. And so that's where I think a lot of the buzzword of regenerative is coming from, is it's that traceability back to the growers, the personal story behind the growers. I think is continuing to be a pretty important trend to the industry. And you see that a lot in the brand marketing and those conversations about really understanding kind of, field or refrigerator type of traceability in the industry. And so those are, besides protein, I would say that that's a continuing theme that is I see out there for sure.
Yeah, I think in addition to the plant-based protein especially really doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Every trade show, every new product launch, seems to solidify the plant-based proteins position on the grocery shelves. Clean labels, of course, everybody wants their labels cleaner, simpler. Origin specificity, there are a lot of people now that are requesting product X must come from, either a very specific group of countries or origins, or can't come from a very specific origin. It's becoming more and more common. And I think just generally having the right certifications from a food safety standpoint, all the organic, the kosher, now the regenerative, to Jason's point, are really focused upon more than they ever have been in my 20-some years in CPG.
Yep, I fully expect we're going to see a lot more at Expo West products and companies featuring all these attributes. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more emphasis on protein. I have somewhat of a curiosity of how that might be tied to the new craze in the Ozempic. That's going to be interesting. I'm no expert on it, but I've heard that the folks that are on or taking Ozempic tend to want to crave more protein, which is just an interesting side note. But
that is an interesting side note.
Yeah. I mean, but of course, we've seen protein over and over again at Expo, and I just expect to see more. And then everybody desiring more understanding about where their ingredients come from, for sure. Yeah. So
I think we're going to see people really focusing on the colors as well now that the U.S. FDA has taken a stance, especially on the red. We're going to see
red dye.
More and more focus on finding, I think, proactively, preemptively finding alternatives to the the artificial and the lake colors that some people still use in their formulations.
All right. Well, good stuff. It's fun to kind of chat about what we're seeing out there. I know we could really do this all day long. It's just fun talking amongst friends, and from Smirk's perspective, I mean, this is the sort of thing we really value. The partnerships that we have with our co-packers and co-manufacturers, like ZoRoCo, are very, very important to us. We see ourselves integral in helping that whole chain, so that in the end, the brand can get that product on the shelf when it needs to be there, with good quality ingredients inside. So Jason and Garrett, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your insights. For our listeners who are interested in learning more about ZoRoCo, of course, you can go visit ZoRoCoPackaging.com. You'll find lots of resources there, and including a way to connect with our friend Jason.
That's right.
And as always, I thank you, our audience, for tuning in to the Get the Scoop with Smirks podcast. And if you want to connect with Smirks, you can reach out to us at what'snew@smirks.com or through our website, smirks.com, of course. But keep on listening here, because Garrett is going to, in the next segment, give us an update on the latest market report on a variety of ingredients. So you're not going to want to miss that. And if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. Leave us a review. We would love that. Share it with your network. And until next time, keep scooping success.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Love seeing you. See you in person just in, what is it, like a few weeks at this point in California. So I know we'll all be at Expo, and we'll all be running around like crazy people, but can't wait to see you guys.
Absolutely.
All right. Take good care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.